I am currently standing in Quarry Junction, home to the majestic and deadly Deathclaw. To the untrained eye, this creature appears completely sci-fi, but upon closer inspection, it can reveal the wonders of science. In fact, all of the amazing creatures in New Vegas have parallels to real-world biology, nature science, and scientific breakthroughs. And I'm gonna explain them all. Oh, and when I call something realistic or non-realistic, that doesn't mean good or bad. I love all the creature designs. This video is just an excuse for me to gush over one of my favorite games and to teach cool science. Starting strong, we have my favorite beefy boy, the Deathclaw. Now, I can't be the only ones that prefer the pre-Fallout 4 models, right? I mean, these guys are just straight up demonic. But could something like that actually evolve after the great oopsie of 2077? Of course not! Which is why it's a good thing that they didn't evolve naturally in Fallout lore. They were cooked up by the US government. Yeah, that tracks. These horny murder devils were created from the oh-so-adorable Jackson's chameleon. No, the Jackson's chameleon. There we go. Using these cuties as a base, scientists who definitely watched way too many Jurassic Park movies spliced together the DNA of various animals to birth the Deathclaw. Then the bombs dropped, the test subjects got out, and now, because someone slept through Science Ethics 101, I can't take a peaceful trip to Quarry Junction. So is any of this Deathclaw lore real science or just mumbo-jumbo? To find out, let's look at gene editing, because I love DNA. Get it? Because it's shaped like a DNA strand. Gene editing hasn't been sci-fi for decades. We've made glow-in-the-dark catfish using jellyfish DNA, ghosts that produce spider silk proteins within their milk, and even that mouse with an ear on its back that inspired that one South Park episode, eek! It's a penis! So Freddy Krueger's persona may not be that far-fetched in the future, especially since humans are only getting better at gene editing thanks to CRISPR-Cas9, or just CRISPR for short. And I actually studied this back in college. The short of it is that scientists use the Cas9 protein to cut and paste DNA. Because Cas9 is a protein that naturally cuts DNA based off RNA instructions. So scientists apply a specific RNA sequence, Cas9 finds that spot in the DNA, cuts it, and it makes it easier for editing. So let's say Fallout scientists want to make a proto-Deathclaw bigger, and they know what DNA strands are keeping it small. They can use CRISPR to find that strand, cut it out, and replace it with the sequence that makes some other animal big, like a gorilla, and boom, bigger Deathclaw. Obviously, this is oversimplified, but that's the gist of it, so the concept of a Deathclaw isn't totally unrealistic. But there is one part of the Deathclaw that's always bugged me. Aside from being part chameleon, we don't know what other animals make up the Deathclaw in lore. Sure, there are theories, and the designer shared his inspiration for the Fallout 4 redesign, but not for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas' model. So I propose my own theory, a gene theory. Looking at the Deathclaw, there are a few key features to examine: the horns, the claws, the stance, and the height. Starting at the horns, while the chameleons do have their own horns, they don't look like these. And if I had to guess, I'd say that they came from the barrel, since their horn shapes match both the standard and Mother Deathclaw models. Now down at the claws, I'm doing a 2-for-1 here, because no animal has claws this long and this sharp. To get such sharpness and the hand shape, I'm saying that there's some monitor lizard DNA in there, like the Komodo dragon, since they have 5 claws, unlike the chameleon that only has 2. Okay, well actually, they do have 5, but they're like fused together, and no one's getting clawed to death by these puppies. But they are perfectly made to hold tiny cute little swords. Okay, back with the claws. For the length, I propose that they came from the most terrifying creature on the planet, the sloth. These Megusta-looking furballs have insanely long claws of around 4 inches or 10 centimeters that they use to hang from trees, and to drug sorority girls, kill them brutally, and dump their bodies in a river. That last one's true. I saw it in the nature documentary Slaughterhouse. Now, unlike the sloth, the Deathclaws are huge, so we're gonna need another animal, and I say that the size comes from the brown bear, because oh boy, those teddies are huge when they're standing upright. Not to mention, since they're found in parts of the US, the government would have easy access to their DNA, contributing height and raw power to the Deathclaw. Now, while bears can stand upright for a time, that doesn't explain the Deathclaw's bipedal stance, so we're gonna need one more animal. And I'm gonna blow your mind with this theory, because I think it came from human DNA. Think about it, the governments of Fallout are crazy, unlike our real-life government, which is totally normal. Human DNA would explain the Deathclaw's 2 legs, as well as its intelligence, group mentality, and the fact that it can learn language in Fallout 2. Plus, with all the Jurassic Park parallels, this gives me an excuse to show off the cursed human-dinosaur hybrid concept from the cancelled Jurassic Park 4.
Oh my goodness!
Okay, sorry, back to the theory. So in summary, when you mix a chameleon, a sheep, a lizard, a sloth, a bear, a human, and a lot of trial and error, what might you get?
A fax machine.
What? No, you probably get a Deathclaw. But hey, that's just a theory. A gene theory. Okay, now roll the funny map pack clip.
Nothing, not even that lolly on the other page, is sexier than math, okay?
This entire bit was just an excuse to show that. So overall, Deathclaws are sci-fi with today's tech, but not impossible for the future. And considering the way the world's going, I wouldn't be surprised if we're trying to make one already in secret. Now, Deathclaws aren't the only thing Fallout is known for. They're also known for bugs. No, not those bugs. These bugs. And let's focus on the coolest one of all, the Radscorpion. It's completely unrealistic. No scorpion has the dexterity to put on a helmet, and no living creature has this high of a radical factor. But unrealistic levels of cool aside, the Radscorpion is just an oversized, irradiated scorpion, specifically the Emperor Scorpion, which originates in Africa. And last time I checked, the Mojave is not in Africa, so this bad boy is unrealistic. Psych! The devs of Fallout 1 thought it all the way through. The Emperor Scorpion, while originating in Africa, is one of, if not the most popular scorpion variety and can be found all over the US in homes and in pet stores. So it being in the Mojave and in all other areas in the Fallout franchise makes perfect sense, cause their ancestors are already everywhere. And I spent way too long cross-referencing photos of scorpions and trying to theorize how an African scorpion got into America, only to discover that it's literally spelled out on the wiki. This is why you always check the wiki first. Now, the Emperor Scorpion prefers warm, humid environments, but as long as the climate isn't too cold, it's fine, so surviving in the Mojave Desert is totally feasible. As for size, real Emperor Scorpions are around 6 to 8 inches long, while the spicy Fallout version can, according to the wiki, range from the size of a large dog to small livestock. Yeah, that wasn't helpful. Never go to the wiki, that's what I always say. To get some solid numbers, we can compare the default Radscorpion model to the hunting rifle in-game, which is based on the Winchester Model 70 and has a length of 44 inches. And placing them beside the Radscorpion, it seems to be just over 2 rifles long, which makes the Radscorpion over 88 inches long, and with the Emperor Scorpion being about 6 inches, that's an increase in size of 14.7 times, assuming it's not one of the larger variants. Well, that's cool, but much like a gym bro trying to determine if his friend is doping, we gotta ask the question, does this growth make sense? It's a common trope in media that radiation creates giant creatures that are huge, strong, and have really stretchy pants, but does this make even partial sense? Not really. Thanks to nuclear bombs, reactor meltdowns, and some F around and find out moments in history, we have a pretty good idea what radiation does to living creatures, and it's not fun. It breaks down DNA on a cellular level, causes cancer, organ failure, infertility, and in the event of getting pregnant, the mutations caused are more permanent debuffs than superhuman strength. So radiation doesn't create giant bugs, and it's not unrealistic just because of the crunchy air, because this size also breaks the oxygen-dependent size limit. To explain, allow me to introduce the Plausible, the largest land scorpion to ever exist. It roamed the world over 300 million years ago and was around the size of a house cat. And back then, it wasn't uncommon for there to be giant bugs. But you ever wonder why modern bugs are manageable with a rolled-up newspaper instead of needing a machine gun in an orbital strike? It all comes down to the oxygen-dependent size limit. To oversimplify, it states the more oxygen in the air, the bigger the bugs can get. Today, oxygen levels are around 21%, with insects this size. But 300 million years ago, oxygen levels reached 35%, so insects grew as large as this. The reason for this is that insects don't pump blood or breathe like vertebrates do. Instead, they take in air through tiny holes in their bodies and diffuse oxygen through tubes called trachea. They can't gulp down and store oxygen like we can, so the thicker the bug, the more oxygen-rich the environment needs to be to keep it from suffocating like a child with a plastic bag. And on top of that, their large exoskeleton gets extremely heavy, and shedding it is going to take a ton of energy. And to understand how much energy, imagine having to break out of a plastic bag every year, except the bag gets thicker and thicker each year until you just die of exhaustion trying. Well, that's how the arthropods do, and another reason why the Radscorpion would not exist. So when Todd Howard announces Fallout 5 in the year 2035 by nuking the US, don't go expecting giant scorpions, but do expect a ton of small boys. One could even be behind you right now. Phew, all that science really got me thirsty, so let's dive into something more liquid. And talk about the Mirelurks. So right, they're not in Fallout New Vegas. Okay, so what's in this game again? Ah, right, Lakelurkers, forgot about them. What do they look like?
You're ugly.
Used as a reskin of the Mirelurk King from Fallout 3 with zero lore connections, the Lakelurker is my worst nightmare scientifically, because what are you? The wiki doesn't even have an origin for the thing, though apparently it used to say they were mutated snapping turtles with no source backing that.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
And I mean, come on, do these things even look like snapping turtles to you? And even if they did, snapping turtles don't even exist in the Mojave in real life. Looking at it, I think it's safe to say that this creature makes no biological sense. And this is why I've just never liked the Mirelurk King design from Fallout 3. It just doesn't fit the whole mutated version of real-life animals motif that Fallout sticks to. It's just too human to not involve some kind of human mutation or experimentation. They didn't even bother giving it webbed feet or hands like those pool toy commercials in the 2000s.
And shark fin flippers for torpedo power.
Super Swimmer Shark Attack includes mask with underwater goggles, web gloves for turns and speed, and shark fin flippers. Available at all major toy stores. By Big Time Toys. Always swim with adults present.
However, I can give it credit for its sonic attacks as they're partially realistic, especially underwater, since sound travels faster in liquids. I went way more in depth on sonic-based attacks in my Skyrim Dragon video, so I'm not going to repeat the whole lesson here again. But you should definitely check it out after this video. The reality of why the Lakelurker looks like this is that Todd Howard probably really liked the hit movie Creature from the Black Lagoon, released in the 1950s, the exact era Fallout draws inspiration from, so Bethesda threw one into the game. I mean, don't they look kinda similar? Wait a second, even the movie gave it webbed hands. Come on, Todd! First you insert a monster that looks more appropriate on a woman's romance novel, and then you circumcise its hands. For shame. Okay, after all that wet and wild fun, let's take to the skies and look at the Cazador. And by skies, I mean just a few feet off the ground. Like Deathclaws, Cazadores did not evolve naturally through the power of atom, but were created by a mad scientist. This time, over at Big Mountain. Dr. Boris is the twisted mind behind them, and sometime in 2003, possibly in May, but definitely on a Tuesday, he spliced up the Cazadores that we see in-game. And don't worry, he took the proper precautions so that it doesn't... Where'd it go? I'm sure it didn't escape the lab. Okay, so they may have escaped, but Dr. Boris made sure that they couldn't reproduce just in case. Whoops, never mind. Negligent science aside, is the Cazador actually possible? Well, with a lot of time, patience, selective breeding, and CRISPR-Cas9, it'd probably be easier to make a Cazador than a Deathclaw, because on paper, it's realistic enough as it's just an enhanced real-life insect and not a chimera of science. Yeah, the Cazador is just a roided-up insect that exists today named the Tarantula Hawk Wasp, which are three words that should never be next to each other. This insect is native to the southern United States and thrive in environments like the Mojave, so by extension, so could the Cazador. Then with gene editing and selective breeding, Dr. Boris could hypothetically enhance its size, strength, and venom potency. And yes, the tarantula hawk already has venom. It wasn't added by science, and its sting is considered the most painful on Earth. So thanks for making it worse, Doc. Okay, I guess that's it. The Cazador is realistic, assuming realistic advancements in technology. Except it's not. Sure, science might create one, but it would have zero chance of surviving long term. Remember that oxygen-dependent size limit? Yeah, that still applies. Not to mention its oversized exoskeleton would be far too heavy for it to live, let alone chase me down while I'm trying to record. But let's say that Dr. Boris knew all this and enhanced its breathing system and lightened its exoskeleton. Sure, why not? He's crazy enough to do that. Except that still doesn't solve the most important issue, its ability to fly. To explain why this is an issue, I'm gonna need to go into a very complex scientific fact, so try to keep up. You see, the heavier something is, the harder it is to lift it off the ground. Hey, you okay? So to fly, bigger wings are needed to lift beefier creatures. And I'm not so sure these Dorito-looking wings could lift the world's angriest bug. But we're gonna find out, and to do that, we're gonna conduct something called half math, which is like real math, but I half-assume some things. First, we're gonna need the Cazador's size, which isn't listed on the wiki. Useless as always. So let's compare the Cazador to the player model. Doing this, we find a Cazador is roughly the same length as the courier's height, that I'll assume is around 6 feet tall, since his name does contain the number 6. Next, we need to know how much bigger a Cazador is compared to the wasp. And since the real tarantula hawk is around 2 inches long, that makes the Cazador 36 times longer. Now, we need to find its volume, and we can use the square-cubed law to find it. This law states that any increase in size increases the volume by the same factor to the third power. So since the Cazador is 36 times larger, we just cube that and get the new volume. And that comes out to the Cazador being 46,656 times the mass of the wasp. But let's round it up to 47,000 since the Cazador is a bit beefier. Then for the weight, the tarantula hawk weighs around 0.56 grams, so multiplying that out, we find that the Cazador weighs around 26,000 grams, or about 58 pounds. This may seem low, but the Cazador is snatched, so maybe it makes sense.
Give me that booty, show me the booty, give me the booty, I want the booty.
Next, we're gonna need to find the area of the wings, and we can see that each wing is roughly the same as its body length of 6 feet. And making the wings a rectangle and using pixels to measure its dimensions because I'm lazy, we find that each wing has an area of 108 square inches, giving us 432 square inches in total across all 4 wings. Now we just need to plug all this into the lift equation for flying objects, and we find that the Cazador would need to fly at a speed of 39 meters per second, or 87 miles per hour, and generate 258 newtons of force just to get airborne. I don't think a Cazador is reaching that level of speed. I mean, that's faster than a Canadian goose, and those things are really fast and objectively more terrifying than a Cazador. Oh, and remember, this is using the optimistically low weight estimate. If it had a more realistic mass, flight becomes even more impossible. So even if Dr. Boris solved all the other physiological problems, there is no way that the Cazador would be able to fly. Now before we get to the final deep dive creature, let's rapid fire some that either share logic we've already covered or are easy to explain. All of the dog type creatures, realistic. Domesticated dogs survived the Chernobyl disaster, reproduced, and didn't develop any dramatic mutations, just like the dogs of Fallout. Though apparently long-term radiation exposure does turn some dogs blue. Oh wait, never mind, this dog just rolled around in a porta potty. Even the half coyote, half rattlesnake Night Stalker is realistic, because when a snake and a coyote love each other very much, they go to Dr. Boris to get genetically spliced together. Because why not? Don't kink shame. Well, at least these didn't escape. Oh, never mind. Now for the remaining bugs in the desert. Here's a breakdown of what each one supposedly evolved from, and it pains me to say it, but they're all unrealistic for the same reasons as the Radscorpion. But shout out to the fire ant and bloatfly, because even though they're a little too big, their abilities are at least grounded in reality, just massively exaggerated. For example, the fire ant can vomit flames, and while no animal can do exactly that, we do have creatures that can launch heated chemicals and acid for defense, like the bombardier beetle. And I go way more in depth on fire breathing in my Skyrim dragon video as well. Hey, get back here, you're supposed to stay in frame. And then there's the bloatfly that just spits at you. Oh wait, sorry, I meant to say it shoots mature larvae at you with a stinger that incapacitates you with neurotoxin while the larva develops and eats you from the inside out! Oh my god, that cannot be realistic, right? Except, it is. Introducing the Copidosoma floridium, a creature that belongs to a group of parasitoid insects that are so horrifying that they literally made Charles Darwin question if there was a loving God in the universe! And that's not hyperbole, that's true.
I have a question for God. Why?
Now I'd like you to enjoy this footage of puppies while I describe their reproduction cycle, because trust me, you don't want to see this. Or maybe you do, I don't know you. This insect will lay eggs inside of a still living caterpillar. Then the larva will slowly eat the caterpillar from the inside out, leaving the vital organs for last so that it lives for as long as possible. So yeah, I now officially hate bloatflies. Now less hated are the bighorners and Brahmin, which are realistic to different degrees. Bighorners are basically 100% realistic. They're just descendants of the derpy looking bighorn sheep. And considering all of the predators after the war, natural selection upped their size a bit for defense. Sure, that all makes sense, but it doesn't explain why they look like me when I don't have my makeup on. Contrary to what you may think, radiation does not cause species-wide genetic shifts. It can cause disfigurement in individuals, but that would differ from sheep to sheep. However, this is a video game with game limits, so let's try to rationalize this more than I do with every decision I've ever made, and just assume that the single model doesn't represent all of the horny sheep in game. In the real lore of Fallout, we can assume that all bighorners share the same basic body plan, but each one has unique burns, rashes, necrosis, and hair loss that isn't shown in game. Cause do you really expect the devs to make 100 different models? This game was barely holding it together as is. Now for Brahmin on the other hand, they're kinda realistic. The blistered skin, hair loss, and swollen udders are all possible radiation effects. But all that would just give us a diseased laughing cow and not a Brahmin, as these gals have the iconic 2 heads. And unfortunately for the Brahmin, radiation cannot cause species-wide changes. So even if an irradiated cow embryo just happens to develop 2 functioning heads, it wouldn't later on give birth to 2-headed calves itself. So in this case, 2 heads are not better than 1. Another mammal of interest is the Yao Guai, which I could not spawn with console commands in-game, so enjoy the PNGs.
This recreation identifies how witnesses say the bear escaped into the woods.
Despite these furry OCs looking a bit too buff, they're basically just hairless bears, which is totally realistic since radiation can cause hair loss and pain, which can lead to increased aggression seen in the Yogi Bear here. Wait a minute, is Yogi Bear named after Yao Guais? Speaking of hairless mammals, there's also the mole rat, which is just a giant naked mole rat. While the naked mole rats don't live anywhere in the US of A, as they're only found in Eastern Africa, but I'll give you one guess why they're here. That's right, the US government genetically engineered them to take down China, which sounds dumb, but IRL, the US has tried to make bat bombs, a cat spy with implanted microphones that immediately got hit by a car, and pigeon-guided missiles. Yes, pigeon-guided missiles. And they actually worked pretty well until we invented better targeting technology that did not involve us sacrificing American pigeons. Your sacrifice has not been forgotten. So the mole rat is just another genetic experiment that escaped. And last in the lightning round is the gecko. No, just no. The tiny western band gecko did not evolve into a human-sized creature that developed gamer posture. Alright, and now the final creature I want to go in depth on is the humans and their variants. So you're gonna tell me that some hairless apes with no claws, horns, or fangs somehow became the most dominant species on the planet through intelligence, and yet were dumb enough to nuke themselves into an irradiated wasteland because they were running out of fossil fuels and didn't prepare any alternatives for this extremely predictable dwindling of oil? Sounds like a plot hole to me. That would never happen in real life. Okay, I'll be serious. The humans of Fallout are obviously realistic. They can be hostile, selfish, and downright evil, but also compassionate, helpful, and good. They're complex. And even when the world becomes barely habitable, they still innovate, rebuild, and sometimes even prosper. But there is one issue, and that's how little redevelopment we actually see in game. Now, I'm not expecting it to look like pre-war America, but it's been 200 years. So why is there still unrepaired infrastructure being used? And why are there so many abandoned cars with perfectly good scrap metal? I have a whole video idea around Fallout's slow redevelopment, and maybe I'll make that soon. Now, the variants to the humans are the ghouls. And we all know that radiation exposure doesn't make you immune to radiation, nor remove your need for food and water. Screw you, Billy, your quest ruined ghoul lore. They needed food and water in Fallouts 1 and 2, you Red Skull looking prick. But the look of ghouls? Horrifyingly enough, is somewhat realistic. In the most extreme cases of radiation exposure, a person could look something like a ghoul, at least superficially. They wouldn't be walking around or talking or nothing, but physically they're not too far off. And this applies only to the non-feral ghouls. The feral ones are pure fiction. The unrealistic part, besides them still being alive, is that the damage is uniform over the entire body. Real radiation injuries appear in patches and not evenly over the entire body. Now here's the part of the video I'd like to talk about Hayashi Ochi, who in 1999 absorbed 17 sieverts of radiation and died 83 days later. For reference, that's more than the workers of Chernobyl received. You know, the event that exploded radiation everywhere. However, I couldn't find any credible info on what he looked like in his final moments, so I'm not even gonna speculate and just move on. Oh, and if you think you've seen a skinless photo of him floating around the internet, you haven't. That was a picture of a house fire victim.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
I fact-checked and do not go looking for it. Or do, I don't care. A better example would be Eben Byers, who in the early 1900s drank 1,400 bottles of radioactive radium water prescribed to him as a painkiller. And after some time, he reportedly developed holes in his skull, lost most of his upper jaw, and his lower jaw completely fell off. And this was while he was still alive. Oh, and if you think you've seen a photo of him with his lower jaw missing on a bunch of different YouTube videos, you haven't. That image was from a plastic surgery book in 1943. Who would have guessed that a lot of YouTubers just don't do any fact-checking?
What if they're all lying? How would we ever know?
And again, I'm not gonna show that photo either, and don't go looking for it. Or do, again, I don't care. Okay, real quick, I do have one more example, and that is of the radium girls, who were watch painters who used radium-based paint at work. And you know how sometimes you'll suck off a paintbrush to get it nice and pointy? Yeah, the workers did that too, and remember how I said that radium was radioactive? Yeah, so if you put 2 and 2 together, you get that these ladies were ingesting radiation daily. Due to this, many of the girls would develop what is called radium jaw, which is characterized by tooth decay, bleeding gums, disintegrating mouth tissue, and jaws so brittle that they could be removed by hand. Now imagine that kind of damage all over the body. Horrifying. The look of ghouls may be an exaggeration, but it is an effective reminder of the horrors of radiation. And that's all of the creatures, I think. Oh, okay. Super mutants and centaurs fall into that gene splicing experiment category, and I think we've talked about that enough, right? Super mutants are sort of realistic if advanced genetic tech keeps improving, while centaurs are way less realistic. They're less gene editing and more genetic grafting. Okay, now those are all the creatures that I wanted to discuss. Now if you made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and hype the video, you know, YouTuber stuff. The next video is either in Cyberpunk 2077 or about gambling in video games, unless Half-Life 3 is announced, in which case I have a different video idea. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want, check out some of the other videos that I've made, especially that Skyrim Dragon one, which is pretty similar to this one. But if not, no pressure. Anyways, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and stay awesome, y'all.